Hey there, wildlife warriors! Get ready for the Conservationists Assemble podcast, where we team up with the planet's mightiest defenders to learn about the diverse species and landscapes that make our world so amazing. If you're new to wildlife advocacy or an expert in wildlife conservation, this is the podcast for you. Today's episode is all about the Wildcats Conservation Alliance, an organisation focused on the crucial conservation of some of the world's wildcats. And here to tell us about the history of the Wildcats Conservation Alliance, the amazing work they're supporting, and the support they get to provide their crucial work, it's Esther Conway. Esther, thank you for joining us today on the podcast. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. And thanks for inviting me to speak to you.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you, and I'm thrilled to hear that you're doing well. So here we're today to discuss all things Wildcats Conservation Alliance and the species that you're helping. But before we get started, Esther, could you please just introduce yourself and let our listeners know who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Esther Conway and I manage the Wildcats programme, Wildcats Conservation Alliance. It's based at ZSL, the Zoological Society of London, and I've been working on this programme since 2007. It seems like a lifetime ago when I started. And I took over the management of the whole programme in 2010.
Fantastic. So could you tell us about the Wildcats Conservation Alliance, its kind of brief history and what the projects and species that they're striving to support are?
Sure. Wildcats Conservation Alliance as a name came about in 2018, but the initiative itself goes back all the way to 1997. It was a time when very few zoos were directly involved in field conservation, but there were field programs desperately needing funds. And Sarah Christie, one of the early members of ZSL's conservation department and an ex-keeper, came up with a plan to encourage zoos to fund conservation projects and established 21st Century Tiger as a granting initiative. So in 2018, so it's jumping quite a way forwards, 21st Century Tiger merged with the Amur Leopard and Tiger Alliance, which was initially set up as a kind of an alliance of about 13 NGOs. And that was also managed out of ZSL, and it was funding critically endangered leopard conservation. And then it also evolved, this is ALTA, as it was known, also sort of evolved into working with tigers as well because of the overlapping habitat. And by joining these two funds together, we formed the newly named Wildcats Conservation Alliance at ZSL with our partner Dreamworld Wildlife Foundation, which is based out of an Australian zoo, with a mission to save wild tigers and Amur leopards for future generations by raising awareness and funds for carefully chosen conservation projects. So essentially, we receive financial contributions from zoos and wildlife parks, but also from members of the public and small corporates around the world. And by pooling this money together, we're able to use that to offer grants to Amur leopard and wild tiger conservation projects across 5 countries in Asia. So it's a kind of win-win for the projects and the zoos. It's a win for the projects because they receive the grant, and it's a win for the zoos as we kind of then help them tell a conservation story. We provide them with regular updates, reports, photos, blogs. They can contact us for up-to-date, leopard numbers, tiger numbers, anything that they need. And as we're a zoo-based program ourselves, we help to showcase that zoo conservation or zoo contributions to conservation are really so significant, and probably a lot of people don't realise that. And they come in lots of different forms. They could come in financial contributions to a fund like us, and also their active own conservation projects. And so it does help to tell that story. So 100% of the contributions that we receive from the zoos go directly to the projects we fund. We can do this because of an annual grant that we get from Dreamworld Wildlife Foundation that covers the cost of our salaries, and then and also our expenses. And while ZSL then provides all of our sort of overall operational support and infrastructure, and together it's able to mean that we can not take overheads from these zoo contributions, which is really important. So when we renamed as Wildcats Conservation Alliance, we chose it because it wasn't associated with either tigers or Amur leopards. It gave us the opportunity maybe in the future to expand into other species. So we kind of future-proofed our name, but at the moment and for the foreseeable future, we are very much focused on Amur leopards and tiger subspecies. So why? There are still fewer than 5,000 wild tigers left, and people are always shocked to hear that. They assume that there are, many more thousands. They are still being impacted by habitat fragmentation and degradation. They are still being poached across all of their ranges. And over the last sort of 70 years, really, they've lost so much of their habitat that it's thought that there's only about 3 or 4% of their historical range left for them. And that is really significant. And the Amur leopard is in an even more perilous state, of course, because there's only around 100 left in the wild. And it's only really been, I suppose, in the past 12 years as science and technology has really begun to play a big part in conservation. And the extent of the biodiversity crisis has been recognised, that national and international and local governments have really started to play a bigger role in conservation. But sadly for the tiger, some countries that realization has come way too late. So the Indo-Chinese tiger is now extinct in Vietnam, in Cambodia, in Laos, and the South China tiger has disappeared as well. And the Chinese now only have the northern subspecies, that is the Amur, that is coming across from the Russian Far East. So both of those species really need our support.
You mentioned how Wildcats is supporting the projects across multiple different countries in terms of funding. How does Wildcats then select which project it's going to fund? Because presumably there are a fair number of projects, and
Sure.
As much as we'd like to be able to fund them all, so could you please tell us a little bit more about that process?
So Wildcats we're only a small team, and so we work mostly with conservation projects that we already know. Currently, we don't actually offer an open call for proposals due to just the huge amount of work that would be involved. The projects we work with have to have a good track record at conducting impactful activities that contribute to, achievable objectives that are aiming to make a really long-term difference to the species. All of the proposals that we receive are peer-reviewed by independent specialists who score the projects against a set criteria, and that's really important for us. And this helps us. This helps us assess the proposals for scientific credibility, to have objectives that are actually achievable, and to use measurable outputs so that we can actually see progress in the projects. So we then have a mixed group of ZSL and non-ZSL conservationists who discuss the results of the reviews, and this panel then helps choose the appropriate proposals from those projects. Sometimes it results in us going back to the projects and actually saying, can we have more information? Could you change this bit? And we have an open dialogue with those projects to request that we get the best value for the money that we're giving.
Yeah, and I suppose, in a roundabout sense or a cyclical nature, by assessing and kind of selecting which projects you're going to fund, by having those criteria, it helps improve the standard of the projects that are applying, in a sense, and so that can only be seen as a good thing.
Absolutely. And by using the peer reviewers, they especially specialists, maybe bringing in somebody who might be more of an educational specialist rather than a conservationist, they can look at some of the activities that are planned and suggest ways that they might be improved. And so, we're able to bring in those people to help us really define a really clear project.
Fantastic. And you mentioned obviously about kind of future-proofing the name for maybe the potential to branch out into other species later on in time. But going forward, what are Wildcats trying to achieve?
So actually, that's a really good question. We are currently developing our next 5-year strategy, revisiting exactly that. What are we trying to achieve? So we're looking at our vision and our mission and how we select our projects, how our activities contribute to the Global Tiger Recovery Plan, Sustainable Development Goals, Global Biodiversity Framework, etc. So we are revisiting a whole heap of our activities to make sure that we're as efficient and as forward-looking as possible. Having said that, our goal will continue to be contributing to the survival of wild tigers and amur leopards by funding impactful conservation projects.
Yeah, and so in terms of the achievements to date, then, what are some of the biggest achievements of Wildcats across its existence?
Wow. One of our biggest achievements, and there have been plenty, was going right back to the early days when 21st Century Tiger managed the IAZA Tiger campaign, and it was the first campaign that ran for 2 years. This was back in 2002 and 2003, so many years ago. And it raised over 750,000 euros through EASA alone. So that was one of our really early successes. One of the key things that what I'm really proud of is that both through ALTA and 21st Century Tiger, we provided funds that helped establish the smart monitoring software across tiger range countries. Obviously, we weren't the only funder of that, but we like to think we played our part in helping to institutionalize this really important tool for conservation. And our projects continue to use it right up to this day. And I suppose on a more recent note, the launch of the Wildcats Professional Development Award last year was pretty cool for us. It's helping to build expertise for young and up-and-coming conservationists for the future.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's certainly, something to take very importantly is inspiring the next generation of conservationists. So yeah, I can see why that would be a huge achievement and something you'd want to shout about. So you mentioned previously about how you don't have any overheads as a result of ZSL and Dreamworld. So what other factors have contributed to the successes of Wildcats?
I think having access to scientists and scientific knowledge by here at ZSL in a room full of conservation practitioners and managers, having the Institute of Zoology just across the road full of scientists and researchers is such an amazing help for us. I can't overstate how important it is to be surrounded by people who are coming up with amazing new ideas and ways to reach out and save wildlife across the planet.
Yeah, definitely a very great resource to have, and certainly our listeners should check that out. So what actions then need to happen to help improve the work of Wildcats?
Well, that's kind of an easy one. We'd like even more zoos to contribute to our work. Zoos that hold tigers and amur leopards, and also for their contributions to help all subspecies of tigers. Zoos quite like the idea that if they hold Sumatrans, they'd like to support Sumatran conservation. If they hold amurs, they want to support work going on in China. But there are other subspecies that need help that aren't held by within the breeding programs, and we would love to see the needs of all tigers helped by zoo contributions, and we'd love to expand our portfolio of projects. If we were getting more money, we could be working in other countries and working with other NGOs. Currently, our funds assist 4 of the tiger subspecies. We would love to expand that to include the Malayan tiger, which really is in need of help. So, yeah.
Yeah, I suppose it does come down to kind of if zoos aren't housing a certain species, they can't provide any value, and that's certainly not true, as you've mentioned. So how can everybody get involved with Wildcats conservation ethic, even if they aren't directly involved with working around these species?
Well, I mean, zoos and members of the public are already doing a lot. We can't do what we do without them. for zoos, what would be great is if they were thinking about communicating species conservation outside of just the sort of international animal days. We have a raft of information that can be shared to zoo visitors. And, you know, it would be great for there to be more joined up comms about the species that are being supported by zoos. Yeah, I know there are an awful lot of species held in the zoos that you know, all need their equal chance of being promoted, being talked about, especially with regards to their conservation in the wild. I think moving away from just thinking about the International Animal Days would be a really good way forwards.
Yeah, there's definitely, like say, a mountain of work that needs doing, and hopefully that's the direction that modern conservation is certainly going in. So Esther, thank you for giving us an insight into the background and the function of the Wildcats Conservation Alliance. So we're just going to switch gears a little bit and learn a little bit about yourself. So yeah, please tell our listeners about yourself and give us an insight into your background and your journey to where you are now.
So I don't actually have a conservation background, and I came into the role precisely because of that. I actually have a degree in history and a background in management and administration. And this role it's about grant management, managing budgets. It's about stakeholder relations, whether that's donors or project implementers. And it's not a hands-on conservation role. And so in the past, conservationists taking on the role of working with wildcats would not stay very long because they wanted to get out into the field. So I came to this role really with very little knowledge of practical conservation action, but I had a big interest in wildlife. I always have done. I grew up around animals, so I've had to learn the technical and science language and depth along the way. And I suppose that is one of the reasons why I so love being surrounded by all these scientists and conservationists, because if I don't know something, and that's often the case, I know there are people who do know how to, assess whether a conservation project is doing what it should be doing. So yeah, that's really helpful. So yeah, that's my background.
And then when did you know that kind of, did you just fall into the role? Like say you came to the role exactly because of not having a conservation background, but were you actively seeking?
No, I literally was in the right place at the right time. I mean, as I say, I started working on this program back in 2007. My kids had started at school. I was looking to go back into the workplace. I lived locally to the zoo. They were looking for somebody with strong management and administrative skills, and I started only on a 2-day-a-week work, which was brilliant at the time for me, easing back into work. So yeah, there is opportunities. There are opportunities for everyone.
Yeah. So yeah, what advice would you give to someone maybe that's not from a conservation background, but these roles that certainly don't just need conservation experience, they need kind of the other things. So what kind of advice would you give to someone that's maybe looking for that transition?
Yeah, well, I mean, as I say, a career in conservation doesn't mean going out into the field and being hands-on. Conservation needs so many skills: marketing, policy specialists, people who can advocate with high-level governments, legal. All conservation teams need to understand the legalities of working in a country. We need technical experts. We also need IT specialists, people who can code. There are so many opportunities now to have to make your impact in conservation and in wildlife. And you don't have to, even if you want to be a field conservationist, you don't have to go overseas. There is so much, and in fact, it's really important to get that. There is so much that needs to be done within our own country on our native species and habitat restorations, and it's not about going overseas anymore. It is very much about looking at our own environment. That is really important. And if I was a young person training as a field conservationist now, that's what I would be focusing on. What needs to be done at home.
Yeah, very poignant point to make there, and kind of. We know that people working within the zoo sector or out in the field, there isn't really a typical day. And if you just listed off, a huge range of tasks that you and other people within a conservation organisation have to do. So is there a typical day for you, or kind of what does a typical day look like, if there is such a thing?
No, there isn't a typical day for me at all. So my day can change from writing reports to doing a presentation, so putting a PowerPoint together. It could be talking to people either face-to-face or via Zoom. Every day is different. And that's one of the things I love about it. I mean, I go from doing the accounts one day to writing a piece for a blog. That is the wonder of the job.
And with that, the kind of love of the diversity of your tasks, is there any particular part of your role that you enjoy above any other?
I think talking to people. I love meeting young people, so talking to school kids about conservation, about biodiversity, about just being green in their lives, about recycling and reusing things and not consuming so much. I love just being able to talk to the public at zoos about the wildlife and why it's really important that we've got these wildlife in our zoo. I think there's still so many people who haven't been to a zoo for so long. They have very old views about what a zoo is like, because they haven't visited it in many years, and it's really lovely to actually hear people go, oh my goodness, it's so different from when I was a child, and just to be able to talk to them about how important conservation is now within the zoo community. Talking to people is what I love best.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that as well. It's great to have those meaningful conversations. So in terms now of what Wildcats can do for you, because you're obviously doing a lot for the organisation and by process species conservation, but is there one lesson you'd say that working for Wildcats has taught you?
that we can all do our bit to make the world a better place. So I think a lot of people feel impotent, that they can't make a difference because the biodiversity crisis, the climate change crisis, everything feels so out of control. But I think that having worked and been in the conservation community for this many years, we can make a difference, and everyone can make a difference themselves personally in the way they live their lives. And I think that's something that I feel is really important.
Fantastic. Yeah, so Esther, thank you for kind of sharing your journey and your experience with us. Just to finish up the episode, we're going to finish on some light-hearted, just some fun questions. So are there any dream species that you'd love to see in the wild?
So probably the Amur leopard would be the one animal that I would love to see in the wild, but that's probably not going to happen. Even those working out in the field rarely ever get to see these elusive animals, especially as there's so few of them left. They might get to see them on their camera traps, but that's about it. But that would be amazing.
And how about then countries or continents that you'd love to visit? Is there anywhere that you'd like to journey to?
Well, on the similar theme, I've never been to India. I know it's strange, but I've never been to India, and I would love to go to India. And it is one of the only places that you have a chance of seeing a tiger in the wild. So, yeah, I want to go to India.
Yeah, I get that. I think there's a reason why it's dubbed a subcontinent. I think that just the diversity that you'd see out there would be incredible, along with tigers. If you could be an animal, Esther, what would it be and why?
Oh gosh, do you know what I thought? I thought about this because you did tell me about this question ahead of time, and what animal would I love to be? Do you know what? I would quite like to be a migratory bird.
Yeah?
I'm not a bird person. I mean, I love the wildlife in my garden, and I feed the birds, and I can identify birds. But the idea of being a migratory bird and seeing the world from up high and seeing the differences and being in, and having an aim and going there, I think that would be pretty special.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great way of looking at it. Not necessarily the species themselves, but just the lifestyle. I get that. I can appreciate that. So when you're not working, how do you keep busy?
I have a dog, so I spend a lot of time walking the dog. I love gardening. I love reading, and I sing in a choir. So I like to sing. And yeah, that pretty much keeps me busy.
Fantastic. And so how can our listeners keep up to date with the work of Wildcats?
So one of the best things to do is to visit our website, conservewildcats.org, and to sign up for our newsletter. It's a really good way of finding out what we've been doing and what our plans are, and to hear about the conservation that we're funding. If those people are from a zoo background, we have a special zoo-focused newsletter that people can sign up to, which includes some more sort of zoo-focused information that is quite useful for people. So if they want to sign up for that, they can get in touch with me and join our mailing list. And keep a watch out for what events we're attending, and come and say hi.
Fantastic. And have you got any events coming up?
So only a zoo-focused event, zoo-focused conferences, etc. BRZA, ERZA, the AZA, Philid Tag. So, yeah.
Oh, amazing. I'm sure some of our listeners will be looking out for those. And what is one thing that you think our listeners should take away from today's episode?
Live your best life, and support Wildcats Conservation Alliance.
Fantastic. So yeah, with that, Esther, you have answered my last question. So a massive shout out for gracing the podcast and putting the spotlight on the incredible work of the Wildcats Conservation Alliance and the projects they seek to support. We also really appreciate you keeping us enlightened on how we can all contribute towards their future. So we wish you and the Alliance all the best in the rest of your projects, and we'll be sure to keep up to date with the developments. That's all from the Conservationists Assemble podcast this week. Thanks a million for tuning in. Follow the podcast on Instagram and Facebook at Conservationists Assemble Pod to stay connected to the latest updates. And hey, if you found this episode as amazing as I did, be sure to like, share and leave a 5-star review. This helps us spread the word and bring you more conservation heroes with their fascinating stories. Thanks team, and catch you all next time.